I'm a little confused.
What's going on, Dan?
A little confused by the messaging coming from MSNBC and their cast of characters. Lawrence O'Donnell on the one hand, and Mad Maxine on the other. No Justice, No Peace, Maxine Waters. Interestingly, she came to some renown during the riots in L.A. post the Rodney King police beating verdict, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a verdict she didn't accept.
Right.
Huh.
She couldn't accept that. And she's the one who encouraged people. You see them at a restaurant, you go up and you confront them.
Correct.
Make
yes.
their lives hell.
Any Trump officials.
Yes, I'm sorry, excuse
right.
me. I forgot that important detail.
Well, so that's my
So
confusion
violent.
because on the one hand, you have Mad Maxine suggesting she's going to be talking to her friends at DOJ and FBI about this civil war that Donald Trump is planning.
I am going to spend some time with the criminal justice system, with the justice system, asking them, tell us what's going on with the domestic terrorists. Are they preparing a civil war against us? Should we be concerned about our safety? What is he doing with this divisive language? It is dangerous, and we're going to have to make sure that we understand that we're not at risk with this man talking in the way that he's doing.
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
because
sure.
of the statement that Trump made that, at some point people have enough. Fox and Friends talking about the prospect of being imprisoned on July 11th by Judge Merchan. So Maxine Waters, she's getting ahead of the civil war that Trump's planning. But then Larry O'Donnell says there's nothing to be concerned about.
Oh.
He saw the crowds that did not show up at the Manhattan courthouse. And you'll remember that he summoned them just before the indictment was announced last year, and they didn't come. They never showed up. So, people think, oh, well, there's no Trump voters in New York City. There's 85,000 of them. On the island of Manhattan alone, 85,000 of them. When you add in Brooklyn, Queens, nearby New Jersey, northern suburbs, there's a few million Trump voters within an hour of that courthouse. They did not come. They are not motivated to go out there and protest for him over his conduct with Stormy Daniels and what he did to cover it up. And I don't believe that there is any serious threat of what Donald Trump would be hoping for, which is some kind of rerun of January 6th. You got to remember how many of those people are in prison, and the rest of them, their mothers are telling them, don't do that again. And I just don't think that threat is really there.
Oh, they're so disappointed that people didn't riot and break windows like they did after the George Floyd death.
Yeah, I mean, although
so sad, too bad.
just
$2 billion worth of damage back then, by the way.
Point of order for Larry. They actually did show up for Trump when he had a formal rally in the Bronx, didn't they?
Oh,
so they're there. They're
thank
just
you.
not going to riot or do some rerun of January 6th, as he suggested, and the notion that Trump is desirous of or planning that.
He's not. We're 6 days removed and no riots and no one has been arrested.
Well,
People handled the verdict because we expected it anyway.
Well, I mean, again, all Trump voters, all 70 million of them are insurrectionists. So I hope the FBI is hiring more interns to make sure that they're monitoring at the level that Mad Maxine has come to expect. For more on this, Jonathan Skule joins us, former executive assistant director for Intel at the FBI. Joshua Skule, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
You heard the distinguished member of Congress from Florida, Maxine Waters, is very concerned about this Trump-incited civil war. Is the FBI on that job?
So the FBI is not going to be on the job of taking their direction from members of Congress, first of all. Secondly, they are seriously taking the domestic threat, which has been on the rise for the last several years due to a host of different beliefs and ideologies. So they take terrorism very seriously.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm sure that's in part true, and in part it's difficult to take seriously when the Richmond office treats Catholics who attend the Latin Mass as a possible domestic terrorist threat. When it
I'm
does
not
it,
saying that there are not mistakes that
yeah,
aren't made. I'm
yeah.
not suggesting that. But no, it is true. And they do take terrorism seriously. And they do look at those things that are radicalizing our populace, whether it's from international or domestic terrorism. And they look for those that cross the line that incite violence.
So when Rashida Tlaib speaks at an event in Detroit, sponsored by an organization that's listed as a terrorist organization by the United States State Department, the FBI is looking into Rashida Tlaib and that organization and her ties to said organization?
Well, we don't know what they're looking into as far as the congresswoman goes, right? But if there is a organization that has substantive ties to international terrorism, then the FBI is investigating it.
Students for Justice on Palestine, all that we've seen on the streets and on the college campuses, is that an area where you believe the FBI is minding the store?
Well, there's difference between, Palestinian people and Hamas, correct?
Yeah,
Correct.
yeah.
Right? So
Yeah.
people that are supporting the Palestinian people versus Hamas would be a big distinction.
I'm aware of the distinction, but that's not the question. The question is Students for Justice in Palestine, outside organizations that have some shadowy funding that are talking about, not talking about protests, chanting, not pro-genocide slogans, calling for the killing of hostages that Hamas currently has, as far as we know. I mean, if it was white supremacists marching through Charlottesville calling for black people to be killed, I'm pretty confident the FBI would be paying attention. So that's what I'm asking with respect to these pro-Hamas protesters on college campuses, and that's what they are.
Yeah. So, well, that's your opinion, and so, but
No, actually, it's not my opinion. There are
in some regards, it is your.
Well,
opinion.
I'm talking about specific. I'm talking about specific organizations.
Let me finish, and then we can have a discussion. So for those that are calling for the incitement of violence, the FBI does investigate those. Sans, background. Doesn't matter. So yeah, while it's not public and we all would like to see things out there in the public so we can judge it, investigations generally are generally and supposed to be in the background until there's a charged document. So as we know, for these folks that are supporting Hamas on campuses, and as has been reported, not all of them students, yes, the FBI would be taking an active investigation into those calling for violence.
Yeah, but they're they're chanting "Death to America, Death to Israel." Are they investigating? I mean, because we're going to have the DNC coming up here, quickly in a few months. And what is the FBI going to do? Are they proactively investigating these people? Because we know who they are.
We do know who they are, but it is a balance between freedom of speech and those that are actually looking to conduct violence. It is. I'm not saying it's easy, folks. It's not. It's hard. And so and just to draw your parallel to Charlottesville, not everyone that was down there was an FBI investigation. So I understand the frustration and I understand where we stand, but there is the right to protest, there is the right to freedom of speech, and then there is the crossing of line where somebody's actually going to commit violence that makes the tipping point.
But have FBI undercover agents with the FBI? Have you infiltrated these groups? Like, were there some in Charlottesville? Were there some at January 6th?
But I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I know what was reported. I mean, I hope that folks have insight into these groups from that perspective so that we can prevent bad things from happening.
Do you think that the FBI should be forthcoming about what at some point? I mean, I don't know how many years it would require, but at some point about what, if any, personnel were on site on January 6th, and what they were doing if they were there, since Christopher Wray doesn't know if they were there or not?
So I think if the FBI had informants there, then that should and likely was reported behind closed doors to Congress, and it was likely given not for public consumption. Now, the debate is, should it be for public consumption, and should others be able to judge whether or not that was an appropriate use of human intelligence? Possibly.
Well, I mean, what's the standard? I guess. I mean, I understand that there are fact specific differences with different circumstances, different investigations, different operations, but there has to be some sort of protocol about what we're going to disclose and what we're not, because the protocol seems to be that we're just going to use sort of ongoing investigation as a cover to never have to disclose anything.
Well, I disagree with that. I mean, the protocol is that they have their oversight committees and they report to them. And their oversight committee is not all of Congress. And I know some of our congressional leaders believe that they should have the right to any information they request, but that is just not what happens. That's one. And two, remember that the FBI is part of the Department of Justice. So many of these requests have to route through justice, and justice determines often what can be shared and when and with whom. There is a lot of information shared with the Gang of Eight, who is a bipartisan committee, as you well know, and that is not in the public. And so, there's good reasons there is not in the public, is because there's sensitive operations that are ongoing that are actually trying to protect us. And I know many people don't want to believe that, but that is the truth.
And the Hunter Biden trial kicked off this week. Anything that the IRS whistleblowers said about their interactions with the FBI and the federal investigation into Biden Incorporated or Hunter Biden that concerns you about the FBI's conduct as it pertains to Hunter Biden?
In fairness, I didn't watch all of the testimony from the IRS agents. I do remember that there was a prosecutor who did not believe that they had enough initially to bring the charges. I know, having been an investigator and believing that you had charges on outside of the political realm, outside of that you really believe that you could and should be charged, and the prosecutor has to take it to trial, doesn't. And that's a healthy, natural tension between investigator and prosecutor.
Well, but what the whistleblowers testified to was that FBI agents were running interference into the investigation.
I don't believe that.
Well, that's what they said.
I understand that's what they said.
You don't believe that? You believe the FBI has been on the level on the Biden investigation?
I do. In my almost 22 years in the FBI, I have never seen somebody try and tip the scales politically, whether that was as an investigator in Chicago to a senior executive. Not one time internal to the FBI.
What about James Comey and going to the Trump Tower to talk to President Trump about, a Steele dossier that was fake? What is your feelings on him?
On James Comey?
Yeah.
I think he.
You don't think he tried to interfere with an election?
I don't. I think there may have been some decisions that were made at the time that, looking backwards, that should have been done differently. But I was also present for some of those decisions, and they were difficult times. I remember that when the decision was made not to charge Hillary Clinton, the Republicans were up in arms. And then when the investigation was reopened, the Democrats were up in arms. So
we don't care about pleasing parties.
The Hunter Biden laptop. I mean, I'm trying to understand the FBI's duties in specific high-profile cases. The Hunter Biden laptop. So you had this all the earmarks of a Russian disinformation campaign op-ed in advance of the 2020 election. When the FBI had possession of Hunter Biden's laptop and knew it was Hunter Biden's laptop, is there any duty to dispel a favorite word these days, misinformation, when it's coming from former intel and law enforcement?
I think it is, and I think if there's mistakes that were made, I think those should be acknowledged. Absolutely. I think it took an inordinate amount of time to get the search warrant for Hunter Biden's laptop, and that certainly should have been expedited.
So, I mean, I know you said you haven't personally seen, a colleague, a supervisor trying to put their finger on the scale in a political way during your time at FBI. But do you believe that is happening at the FBI in present over the last several years?
I don't. I don't believe that. I know too many of the folks there that and had worked around several of them to know that is not happening. I think difficult decisions are being made, and those decisions rightfully are being scrutinized, especially in today's environment. And I think and I think that for some of the leaders, that is something that has to, they have to stand up and be accounted for. Do I think there are at times, or have been historically, some decisions, if they had different information, they would have made different decisions? Yes.
You mean like Kevin Kleinsmith altering an email?
Well, actually, Kevin Klein, yeah, 100%. But he also was charged.
Well,
and
well,
hold on.
Yeah, I
And
understand.
a lot of people can't. What's that?
I understand he was charged. Yeah.
And should have been.
Yeah.
And what the American public didn't see and couldn't see is the visceral reaction from the folks that found out about that internal to the FBI. Visceral reaction. And so it's hard to convey that to the American public of how the disdain that the folks I was associated with had when that was discovered.
So, we used to have, Kevin Brock, the former assistant director of counterintel at FBI, was a frequent guest on our show, and we would talk a lot about the FBI in these instances. And so he was senior level, and unfortunately, he recently passed away, as you undoubtedly know. And I mean, he was he didn't agree with everything I said about the FBI, and he gave great perspective on it. But he certainly thought there was a politicization in the leadership problem at FBI under Comey that extends to Wray. And Kevin Kleinsmith, you say, was a one-off, and that otherwise is just not a problem at FBI. People have it wrong.
Well, Kevin Kleinsmith, he had his opinions.
Kevin Brock.
I'm sorry, Kevin Brock. Apologize. Kevin Brock had his opinion. I didn't agree with them. He had no way to know what went into those decisions. He came from a different era, and frankly, plenty of folks want in different eras in the FBI want to go back to the way they thought it was versus the way the world is today.
You think that Jim Comey and Andy McCabe are doing the FBI a service with their commentary on MSNBC and CNN and so forth?
I mean, that they're private citizens and allowed to speak they want. I mean, they're not tied to the FBI. So,
you think it's inspiring? FBI. You think it's inspiring confidence in the FBI?
I think there's a lot of things that are eroding confidence in the FBI, not just them. And so, and I think that when you rightfully, the FBI should be scrutinized and held to a high standards. But when you're criticizing the outcomes of certain judicial events, and unfortunately, when investigations come to light, remember, an investigation is not a charge. It is a determination if there is enough to charge, and the prosecutors make the decision as to whether to charge. So I think some of this has gotten kind of thrown into a blender and mixed all together in that regard.
He is Joshua Skule. He's former executive assistant director for intelligence at the FBI. Joshua Skule, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
As a business owner, do you have a strategy for exiting your business? Most business owners don't. Studies done by the Exit Planning Institute show 75% of business owners who don't have an exit plan are dissatisfied with their exit, and 80% of businesses put to market never sell. Total Clarity Wealth Management understands the hesitation to discuss exiting. Will customers leave? Will competitors take advantage? Will key employees leave? That's why they offer confidential planning. Contact Anne Marie at Total Clarity Wealth Management. Discover what the financial foundation should be to pursue an exit